Lena moved quietly between the tables, balancing a tray with practiced ease. The restaurant was already filling up, and she knew the rush would last for hours. It always did on weekends. People came for the warm food, the low prices, and the feeling that the place somehow held old memories they could not name. She had worked there long enough to understand every type of customer that walked in. Some said thank you. Some barely looked at her. But she never let it bother her. She had learned to keep her thoughts calm, even when her feet hurt. The smell of roasted chicken mixed with the sound of clinking dishes. Somewhere in the corner, the dishwasher hummed like a tired machine. And near the front, next to the window, stood the one thing in the whole restaurant that made her stop and look every single day, the upright piano. It was old, with scratches on the sides and keys that had faded from white to a pale yellow. Most people thought it was just decoration, but to her, it meant something more. It reminded her of another life she once imagined, one she never got to live. Every morning before customers arrived, she would dust the piano. She always took her time, running the cloth lightly across the keys. She never pressed down, not even once. She didn't want anyone to hear a sound and think she was trying to play. The restaurant manager had said the piano was there for open mic nights and weekend performers, not for staff to fool around on. So she respected that. But in her heart, she longed to sit down and let her fingers remember everything they once knew. She had played piano as a child. Not with a fancy teacher or in some academy, no. She learned from an old man who lived next door when she was little. He taught her songs slowly, pressing her tiny fingers into the right positions. She grew up believing that music was a place she could run to when life became too heavy. But life changed, as it always does, and when she grew older, she had to leave her lessons behind. Money was short. Work became more important than hobbies. Dreams faded. And now, years later, the piano was just something she cleaned dot as she walked back to the counter to pick up another order. The manager called out to her. "Lena, need table 7 served," he said. She nodded and took the plates, making her way toward the family waiting there. She placed their food down one dish at a time, giving each person a small smile. The children barely looked at her. They were too busy arguing over a toy. The parents thanked her politely, then went back to their conversation. Lena didn't mind. She had learned not to expect much, but even as she moved on to the next task, her eyes drifted again and again toward the piano. It felt like a quiet friend standing there. A friend she wasn't allowed to talk to Dot later in the afternoon. When the crowd eased a little, she finally took a short break. She went to the back, sat on a stool, and stretched her fingers. They always got stiff after long hours of carrying trays. Sometimes she wondered if her hands remembered how to play. Sometimes she even moved her fingers as if they were gliding over keys. She tried not to think too much about it. The more she thought, the more it hurt, because a part of her wondered if she had wasted her gift. A coworker walked in, holding 2 cups of tea. "Here," he said, handing one to her. "You look tired." She thanked him and took a sip. The warm drink relaxed her a little. Her coworker talked about his plans for the weekend, about visiting friends and going to a concert downtown. She listened politely, though concerts always made her think about music in a way she didn't want to. She didn't want to feel jealous. She didn't want to feel like she had missed something important. When the break ended, she went back to work. The evening crowd was already pouring in. Families, couples, travelers passing through town, everyone seemed to arrive at once. She slipped back into her rhythm, greeting customers, carrying plates, cleaning tables, and making sure everything ran smoothly. By now, she could handle 3 tasks at once without panicking. The job was tiring, but she was good at it. Around 7 o'clock, a small group of people entered, each carrying musical instruments. They often came on weekends to play during the open mic sessions. The manager welcomed them, shaking their hands and pointing them toward the piano. Lena stepped aside to let them set up. She didn't know them personally, but she had seen them many times. They played with energy, sometimes loudly, sometimes without much skill. But the customers liked having live music in the background. One of the performers brushed past her and said, "Hey, can we get some water for the group?" She nodded and hurried to bring a tray of glasses. As she placed them on their table, she noticed how casually they touched the piano, tapping its keys, dropping their bags near it, treating it like a simple tool. She envied them. Not because they were better, some of them weren't, but because they had the freedom to sit and play without needing permission. When the music began, Lena continued her work. The performers played cheerful tunes that filled the room. Some customers clapped. Others barely noticed. It was normal for weekends. Lena moved between tables with practiced grace, but her ears listened quietly. Every wrong note made her twitch. Every sloppy rhythm made her chest tighten a little. She didn't judge them, but she couldn't stop hearing the mistakes. She had trained too long in her childhood for it not to bother her. At one point, she found herself standing still for a second, tray in hand, listening to a part of a song. Something about it sounded familiar. Maybe she had played it once, but the performer's version was messy, rushed, almost careless. She looked away and forced herself to keep moving. She didn't want anyone to notice her staring. As the night grew busier, she forgot about the piano for a while. Customers needed things, and she focused on helping them. But even in the middle of the rush, she felt something pulling at her, an old memory, like a whisper telling her she didn't belong behind a tray forever. When the rush finally calmed, she stood near the service counter, sipping water and catching her breath. A regular customer, an older woman who often came alone, waved her over. Lena approached with a smile. "You look tired tonight," the woman said kindly. "It's been a long day," Lena replied. The woman nodded toward the piano. "Have you ever played?" The question caught her off guard. "Played? Me?" "No," she said quickly, but the woman tilted her head. "The way you look at it, it's like you're listening for something." Lena froze for a moment. She tried to smile. "I just think it's a nice instrument." The woman didn't push further, but her gentle eyes seemed to say she knew more than Lena wanted to admit. Lena excused herself and walked away, feeling strangely exposed. The night moved on, but the question lingered in her mind. "Have you ever played?" She heard the words again and again. Why had she lied? Why couldn't she simply say yes? It wasn't shame, she knew that. It was fear. Fear of admitting she once had a dream she no longer believed she could reach. The performers played their final song, packed their things, and left the stage area. The piano sat alone again, quiet, waiting. The lights above it cast a soft glow over the keys. Lena looked at it one last time before closing her shift. She felt a strange mix of longing and sadness. Some dreams, she thought, don't disappear. They just wait. She clocked out and walked past the piano on her way to the door. Her fingers twitched. For a moment, she almost reached out and touched one key, just to feel it, just to remember. But she didn't. She walked out into the cool night air, unaware that everything was about to change soon, and the piano she had avoided for so long would pull her back into a world she thought she had lost forever. The weekend crowd returned the next evening, filling the restaurant with the same noise and impatience that always came with busy nights. But something felt different to Lena as she tied her apron and stepped out onto the floor. She didn't know why, but her mind kept drifting back to the piano and the question the older woman had asked her the night before. It echoed in her head even as she greeted customers and carried dishes. Had she ever played? Yes, but why did it feel so hard to admit? She shook the thought away and focused on her tasks. The restaurant was already buzzing. Families talked loudly, children pushed straws into their drinks and made little popping sounds, and groups of friends leaned over plates of food, laughing. The tables filled quickly, the usual start to a long night. The manager rushed around, checking on the staff, reminding everyone to move faster. "We're expecting a bigger crowd than yesterday," he said as he walked past Lena. "Keep the tables turning." She nodded and went back to her work, trying not to think too much. But her eyes kept drifting to the corner. The piano looked the same as always, quiet, patient, untouched. The performers for the night hadn't arrived yet, so it sat alone, the dark wood shining under the warm lights. Every time Lena passed it, she felt something in her chest tighten, like a small pull she didn't want to feel. For a moment, she paused in front of it while waiting for a new order. Her hand almost lifted, almost touched the edge of the keys. But she forced her arm back down and looked away. She had lived long enough to understand that old dreams could be dangerous things. They could make you believe there was still time, when maybe there wasn't. The door opened, and the performers walked in, carrying their bags. They greeted the manager, laughing as they joked about last night's set. One of them tapped a few notes on the piano, testing the sound. Lena turned away quickly before anyone noticed her staring. She took her tray and headed to a table, where a young couple waited for their food. They thanked her politely as she placed their dishes in front of them. She smiled back and looked around the room, trying to focus on her tasks. But no matter how much she tried to stay busy, she could feel the music creeping into her thoughts. Every time someone touched the piano keys, even lightly, her heart reacted. She didn't know whether it was longing or pain. Maybe both. As the performers began their warm-up, the familiar sound filled the room again, messy chords, uneven rhythms, and loud voices talking over each other. Lena worked through it the way she always did, but today the music bothered her more than usual. It was like listening to someone read a book with all the words out of order. A little later, the older woman from the night before walked in. She sat at her usual table near the corner. When she saw Lena, she smiled warmly. "Good evening, dear," she said. Lena returned the smile. "Good evening. I'll bring your tea in a minute." "Thank you," the woman said, then glanced at the piano. "Looks like another busy night." Lena nodded quickly and walked off before the conversation could turn toward music. She brought the woman her tea and placed it gently on the table. The woman looked at her with kind eyes, but didn't ask anything this time. That small kindness somehow made the question in Lena's heart even louder. As the night grew busier, Lena focused on her work again. Then a sudden loud crash echoed from the back of the restaurant. A tray had slipped from someone's hands. Everyone turned to look, but after realizing no one was hurt, they went back to their meals. Lena hurried to help clean up the mess. She crouched down and picked up the broken pieces of glass. Her coworker apologized, shaking his head. "My hands are tired tonight," he said. She gave him a soft smile. "It happens to everyone. Don't worry about it." They cleaned together before she returned to her section. By the time she finished, the performers had started their set. Their first song was loud and upbeat. Some customers tapped their feet. Others barely reacted. Lena moved through the room, taking orders and clearing dishes. When she approached a table near the piano, she noticed a young boy staring at the instrument with wide eyes. He was small, maybe 7 or 8 years old, and he seemed completely fascinated. His mother noticed Lena watching. "He loves music," she said. "He keeps asking if he can try the piano, but I don't think we're allowed." Lena smiled gently. "It's for performers mostly," she said. "But someday he might play on a big stage." The boy looked up at her, eyes bright. "Do you play?" he asked. The question hit her harder than expected. She froze for a moment, then shook her head. No, she said softly. I just work here. He didn't seem convinced. But you look like you know how. She didn't respond. She only smiled and walked away, feeling her heart tighten again. Hours passed, and the night kept going. The performers took breaks, chatted loudly, and played a few more uneven songs. The restaurant stayed crowded, and Lena kept moving. But the little boy's question stayed with her. Do you play? She wondered how she would have answered years ago. She wouldn't have hesitated. Back then, music was the one thing that belonged to her alone. Now she wasn't sure if she could even call it hers. Her break came late that night. She sat down in the back room, stretching her sore legs. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to rest, but her mind wouldn't stop. She kept hearing stray piano notes from the dining area. Each sound carried a memory, her small hands on the keys, her old neighbor praising her, her own laughter when she finally mastered a new piece. She missed that girl. She missed the version of herself who believed she could become something more. When her break ended, she stepped back out onto the floor. The performers were packing up for the night. The piano stood alone again, in the warm glow of the lights. Its presence felt bigger tonight, almost like it was waiting for her. She walked past it slowly, pretending she didn't care. But something made her stop. A single key was slightly out of place, maybe bumped by someone earlier. She reached out to fix it, just nudging it back in line. But her finger slipped, and the key made a soft sound, a small, quiet note. It was nothing. Just one tone, barely heard over the noise of the restaurant. But to her, it was everything. Her heart jumped in her chest. Her breath caught for a second. That one sound reminded her of an entire world. She used to live in a world where music flowed from her hands without fear. She stepped back quickly, almost like she had touched something she wasn't supposed to. She looked around to see if anyone noticed. No one did. The manager was busy talking to staff. Customers were paying bills. Everyone was wrapped in their own world, but she wasn't. Not anymore. That one note had reached a place inside her she thought was gone. She walked away, but her steps felt unsteady. She knew that something inside her had shifted, something she couldn't explain. Before clocking out, she passed the older woman's table. The woman smiled up at her. See you tomorrow, she said warmly. Lena nodded. Good night. The woman glanced at the piano, then back at Lena. Music never forgets, she said softly. Lena froze, her breath catching. She didn't know what to say. She simply nodded again and walked away. When she stepped outside into the cool night, she felt different. Lighter somehow, but also unsettled. She didn't know what was coming. She didn't know how much her life was about to change. She only knew one thing for certain. The sound of that single piano note wasn't going to leave her anytime soon. The next day arrived with a soft morning light, but Lena felt heavier than usual. She woke up earlier than she needed to, unable to sleep well after everything that had happened the night before. That single piano note kept replaying in her mind, soft but clear. It felt like it had followed her home, slipping under her door and settling into the quiet of her small apartment. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, staring at her hands. They were steady, the same hands she used every day at the restaurant, hands good for carrying trays, wiping tables, packing leftovers, ringing up bills. But she wondered if they still remembered what it felt like to move across piano keys, gliding from one note to another as if music lived inside her. The thought made her chest feel tight. She pushed it away, got dressed, and prepared for work. When she arrived at the restaurant, the morning crew was already bustling about. Someone was mopping the front entrance, another worker was restocking condiments, and the cook was preparing for the lunch rush. Her manager nodded at her as she came in. Morning, Lena. We need table setups done fast today. A big group is coming in later, he said. She nodded and got straight to work. She arranged silverware, placed napkins neatly, and checked the salt shakers one by one. The tasks were simple and familiar, and for a while they helped quiet her thoughts. But every time she walked past the piano, she felt herself pause, not visibly, but inside. It was like her mind leaned toward it, even if her body kept moving. By the time noon arrived, the restaurant was nearly full. Families talked loudly over their meals. Couples leaned close to each other, and workers from nearby businesses had come for lunch. The noise rose and fell like waves, and Lena moved through it with practiced rhythm. "Can I get some extra sauce?" "We're ready for the check." "Excuse me, miss?" She answered every request with calm politeness. She had learned long ago that customers felt more comfortable when the staff spoke gently, even when they were impatient or rude. She kept her tone steady, but no matter how many tasks she completed, the piano stood in the corner, reminding her of something she couldn't ignore anymore. The performers arrived early that day, a whole hour before their usual time. They carried their bags, laughing among themselves. One of them dragged a stool across the floor, and the sound made several customers turn their heads. As they sat up, one of the performers began tapping random keys. The notes were clumsy, loud, and careless. Lena felt the same uncomfortable twist inside her chest. She continued wiping down a table, but she wished she could tell him to be gentle with the keys. The lunch crowd began thinning out, replaced slowly by the afternoon customers. The performers used the quieter time to warm up, trying different songs. Lena didn't focus on them, but she couldn't block out the sound completely. Every wrong note, every uneven beat, it all pressed against her, like a memory trying to break through. Around 4 o'clock, something unexpected happened. A small argument broke out between two performers. They disagreed about which song to play that night. Their voices rose, attracting the attention of nearby customers. Lena hurried over to ask if she could refill their water or help with anything, hoping to ease the tension, but one of them ignored her completely. He sat at the piano and began playing a complicated piece much too fast. Notes spilled out like they were tumbling over each other, crashing instead of blending. Lena felt something inside her snap. Not anger, not frustration, something else. She stepped back, turned away, and tried to focus on a table that needed clearing. But the messy sound chased her across the room. She paused beside a stack of dirty dishes, closed her eyes for a moment, and took a long breath. She couldn't explain why the noise bothered her so deeply. Maybe because she once understood how the music was supposed to sound. Maybe because she had spent years pretending her gift didn't matter. Maybe because she had allowed life to bury a part of her. She wasn't sure. She only knew that something inside her was shifting, whether she liked it or not. Later, when she passed the older woman's table, she noticed the woman watching her again. She carried a warm smile, soft and knowing. "Are you all right tonight?" the woman asked. "Yes," Lena replied quickly. "Just a busy shift." The woman stirred her tea slowly. "Sometimes we get busy to avoid what we don't want to face." Lena didn't respond. She didn't know how. The woman looked toward the piano. "You know? Sometimes life circles us back to the things we love, whether we want it or not." Lena felt her heart tremble at those words. She forced a smile and excused herself. The evening crowd arrived soon after. People lined up at the entrance, waiting to be seated. The restaurant filled with noise again, and the performers continued warming up. The air buzzed with chatter and the smell of food. But tonight, even as she worked, Lena felt an unusual energy inside her. A restlessness she couldn't shake. When the performers finally started their first song of the night, the sound was even rougher than usual. They picked a fast tune they hadn't practiced well. Customers tried to talk over it. A few grimaced. Some whispered to each other. Lena felt embarrassment on their behalf. She passed the older woman again. who gave her a gentle nod as if she already knew something was about to happen. The evening dragged on, and the performers continued to struggle with their songs. At one point, one of them stopped playing altogether and groaned. "This piano is terrible," he complained loudly. "You can't play properly on this thing." Several customers heard him. Some nodded in agreement. Others frowned. Lena walked over with fresh water, trying to calm the situation. "Maybe it just needs a softer touch," she said quietly before she could stop herself. The performer looked up at her. "You think you can do better?" he teased, rolling his eyes. Lena froze. His friends laughed. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her cheeks warmed. She felt like a spotlight had been thrown on her. "I didn't mean," she tried to say, but the performer cut her off. "Relax, I'm joking. Unless you actually can play?" The group laughed again. Customers nearby looked toward her, waiting for her answer. Lena swallowed hard. "I just meant the piano isn't the problem," she said quietly. The performer smirked. "Right, sure, whatever you say." She stepped back, wishing she hadn't said anything. As she walked away, she felt something rise in her chest, a feeling she hadn't felt in years. Not pride, not fear, something like a spark. She didn't know what to do with it. She only knew she couldn't pretend she didn't feel it. Hours passed. The night grew louder. The performers struggled again and again, trying to impress the audience, but failing to keep the room's attention. Some customers whispered that the music was too loud. Others rolled their eyes. A few asked the staff whether different performers were coming. Lena watched it all from the sidelines. She tried to stay focused on her work, but the piano kept drawing her attention. Again and again. It felt like a magnet. Near the end of the night, something unexpected happened, something small, but enough to shift the energy in the room. The last performer on the list texted the manager to say he wasn't coming. The manager stared at his phone and groaned. "Great, we still have an hour to fill." The performers didn't have more songs prepared. The crowd looked tired of the music already. The room felt restless. Then the manager said something Lena didn't expect. "Well, unless someone else wants to play, we're out of luck." He said it jokingly, but several customers laughed and looked around. The older woman glanced directly at Lena. The performer smirked, and Lena felt the spark inside her turn into a flame. She didn't step forward. Not yet, but for the first time in years, she didn't look away from the piano. It felt like a quiet challenge, a calling, a door she had closed long ago, slowly opening again. She didn't know what would happen. She didn't know if she would ever gather the courage to sit at the piano, but as the night neared its end, one thing had become clear to her. She could no longer pretend she didn't hear the music calling her back. The day after the unexpected performance, the air inside the small restaurant felt different. People walked in with a kind of curiosity that hadn't been there before. Some of them weren't even here for the food. They kept whispering to each other, glancing toward the corner where the piano sat quietly, as if waiting to be woken up again. The waitress, who had played it so suddenly the night before, moved through the tables with her usual calm steps. She didn't carry herself like someone who had impressed a room full of strangers. She simply did her job, greeting customers, placing drinks, and making sure everyone felt comfortable. But the truth was, something inside her was changing. She could feel it. It was like the music she had pushed down for so long had found a way back into her life. It wasn't loud or demanding. It was gentle, almost like a reminder of who she used to be. Every time she passed the piano, her eyes flicked toward it and away again, hoping nobody noticed. She wasn't looking for attention. If anything, she wished the sudden interest from people would fade. But at DID and single quotes T. Around midday, a group of customers walked in. 4 people, maybe in their late 20s. They sat near the piano, whispering among themselves. One of them called the waitress over and asked, with an excited smile, if she was the same person who played the night before. Her face warmed with embarrassment. She nodded quickly, trying to keep it small and unimportant, but the group reacted with loud praise. They told her how surprised they had been, how beautiful the music sounded, and how the entire room had gone silent as she played. She thanked them softly. But inside, she felt a strange mix of pride and nervousness. She wasn't used to being noticed. She wasn't used to people asking her about her talent. For years, she had worked quietly, avoiding anything that brought too much attention her way. But now, people were walking in just to see her. Some wanted to hear her play again. Some wanted to know her story. The restaurant owner noticed the change too. He had been surprised the night before when he heard the piano come alive with music. He had known the waitress for a while now, but he had never suspected she could play like that. He had stayed quiet about it at the time, not wanting to embarrass her. But that afternoon, when he found her near the kitchen, he gently asked if she would consider playing for the customers again sometime. She froze at the question. She didn't mean to. It just happened. Her mind returned to old memories, ones she hadn't revisited in years. She remembered a different time, a younger version of herself sitting at a piano, practicing long hours, dreaming big dreams. She remembered how life had shifted in a direction she didn't expect. Her hands tightened slightly as she realized how far she had drifted from that part of her life. She told the owner she needed time to think about it. He nodded gently, not wanting to push her. He understood she was uncomfortable, and he respected that. But he also had seen the way customers reacted. He knew her music could bring something special to the place. Later that evening, as the restaurant began to fill up with the dinner crowd, she noticed the same familiar faces returning. Some ordered food. Some ordered drinks. But their eyes kept shifting toward the piano, waiting, hoping. She felt the weight of their expectations, even though nobody said a word. She could sense the tension inside her growing. She didn't like disappointing people, but she also didn't want to be trapped by the attention dot as she worked through her shift. She overheard conversations at different tables. A few customers were describing the moment from the night before, the silence, the surprise, the way her hands moved. Others were guessing whether she had learned professionally. Some thought she had studied at a music school. Others imagined she had played since childhood. None of them knew the real story. By the time she finished serving the last table, she felt exhausted, not from work, but from the emotions swirling around her. She stepped outside for a moment of fresh air. The night breeze cooled her warm cheeks. She stared at the sky, wondering how her life had suddenly changed in just one evening. Just then, someone approached her from behind. It was a regular customer, someone kind who always tipped fairly and never caused trouble. He asked if she was all right. She nodded, saying she just needed a break for a moment. He smiled softly and told her that people weren't pressuring her on purpose. They were simply moved by her music. He said it was rare to hear something so genuine from someone so humble. She didn't know how to respond. Compliments always made her feel uneasy. But the way he said didn't feel overwhelming or demanding. It felt honest, like he truly meant to encourage her. Later, when she went back inside, she kept thinking about his words. She wondered why music still had such a strong pull on her, even after she had buried that part of herself for so long. She wondered if it was fear holding her back, or something deeper. She wondered if she had already lost her chance long ago. The restaurant slowly emptied as the night went on. The last few customers finished their meals and left. The lights dimmed to their evening glow. The owner wiped down the counter while humming softly. She gathered the last of the dishes and cleaned the tables. When everything was finally quiet again, she found herself standing near the piano. She didn't know how she ended up there. Her feet had just carried her over without thinking. The keys sat untouched, resting patiently under the warm glow of the overhead lights. She reached out and touched one key lightly. A soft note echoed in the empty room. It wasn't planned. It wasn't practiced. It just happened. She pressed another key, then another. Slowly, a tiny melody formed, one she used to play long ago when she was young. Before she knew it, she was sitting down. Her fingers moved gently, almost as if remembering things for her. The melody was quiet, warm, and fragile. It filled the empty restaurant with a feeling she hadn't felt in years. She didn't play loudly. She didn't play with the intention of performing. She simply played to breathe. The owner walked out from the back and stopped when he heard the music. He didn't say anything. He didn't move or interrupt. He just listened, leaning lightly against the doorway, not wanting to break the moment. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, she let out a sigh she hadn't realized she was holding. She felt lighter, calmer, almost like she had found a missing piece of herself. The owner stepped forward slowly and told her that whatever decision she made, he would support her. But he wanted her to remember this feeling, the peace, the comfort, the connection. He said music wasn't something she had to hide. It was something meant to be shared. She didn't answer him right away. She wasn't ready to. But deep down, she knew he was right. Something inside her had awakened again, something she thought she had lost. And now that it was back, she didn't know if she could ignore it anymore. She closed the piano lid gently, whispered a small thank you to the owner, and walked toward the back to gather her things. The night was quiet as she stepped outside once more. But this time, she didn't feel burdened. She felt hopeful, uncertain. Yes, but hopeful as she walked home under the streetlights. She kept replaying the melody in her mind. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. Music was no longer just a memory. It was becoming part of her life again, and she was finally ready to face what that meant. The room was still buzzing long after she finished playing. People were talking softly at their tables, replaying the moment like they were afraid they might forget it if they stopped thinking about it for even 1 second. Some guests kept glancing toward the piano, as if expecting her to sit again and continue the magic. Others simply sat there quietly, holding on to the warm feeling the music had left inside them. She stood near the counter, unsure what to do. She wasn't used to this much attention. All her life, she had tried to stay unnoticed, keeping her head down and doing her work. But now people were walking up to her, one after another, smiling like they had known her for years. They thanked her, praised her, and asked how she learned to play so beautifully. She tried to answer everyone with a polite smile, but inside she felt overwhelmed. The emotions were too many: joy, shock, fear, hope. It felt like all the years she had buried her dream suddenly opened up again, and she didn't know how to handle the light pouring out of it. The manager came over too, and he looked more proud than she had ever seen him before. He lightly tapped her shoulder and told her to take the rest of the night off, saying she deserved it. She wanted to laugh at how strange that felt. She had worked here for a long time, and never had he told her to relax. But tonight was different. Tonight didn't feel like work at all. She went outside for some fresh air, hoping that quiet would help her settle down. But even outside, guests were gathered by the doorway, talking excitedly. When they noticed her, they waved or smiled warmly, making her cheeks heat up again. One of the guests, the older woman who always came in for tea, walked up to her slowly. She had been the first person to clap after the performance. She touched the waitress's hand gently and told her that she hadn't heard something so beautiful in years. Her voice shook a little as she spoke, and the sincerity in her eyes made the waitress swallow hard. The woman asked her why she didn't perform anywhere else. She said the talent she had was not something that should stay hidden. This question made the waitress feel a sting in her chest, because she knew the answer too well. Life had pushed her away from music. She never had enough time, money, or courage to chase what she loved. Every time she tried to go back to it, something came up that demanded her attention more. Before she could reply, someone else stepped forward. A man who had been sitting at the back came closer and introduced himself politely. He said he taught music at a small local school and had worked with young musicians for years. He spoke kindly and carefully, saying he didn't want to pressure her, but he wanted her to know that her playing was special. He said he had heard many students over the years, and what she had wasn't something that could be taught. It was something that came from the heart. She didn't know what to say. She stood there listening while the cool air brushed past her. The man explained that if she ever wanted guidance, lessons, or even just someone to talk to about music, he would gladly help. His offer felt unreal. People didn't offer her such chances. Not before tonight. When she went back inside, the restaurant looked different to her. It was the same walls, same tables, same busy hum of conversation, but she felt like she was seeing it all for the first time. She had always believed this place was where her dream ended. But now, it felt like the place where her dream had woken up again. The night continued with customers, treating her as if she were the star of the show. Some asked if she had any recordings. Others asked if she had social media. She laughed nervously and said no to both. She had never imagined anyone would want to listen to her, let alone follow her online. There was one moment when she stood alone near the piano again. Her fingers slowly touched the keys, not to play, but just to feel them. She felt warmth spread through her chest. The piano wasn't decoration anymore. It wasn't a dream she had abandoned. It felt like a doorway she had finally stepped back through. As she stood there, she remembered the younger version of herself who had practiced for hours every day, hoping one day she would play on a stage. She remembered the pride she once felt in her own abilities and the way music used to calm her whenever life became too much. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting those memories wash over her. Her life had changed slowly over the years. She took this job because she needed stability. She worked more shifts than she wanted because she couldn't afford to take time off. She kept telling herself there would be time later, time to play, time to dream, time to be herself. But later never came. Tonight, however, showed her that it wasn't too late. The dream she thought she had lost had been sitting inside her, waiting patiently. And now that it was out in the open again, she felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. What if she tried again and failed? What if she tried and succeeded? Both possibilities scared her. When the shift finally ended, she gathered her things slowly. The manager wished her good night and told her again how proud he was. She nodded, still not fully believing everything that had happened. As she stepped outside, the street was quiet and peaceful. A soft breeze moved through the trees, and distant lights shimmered against the dark sky. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel tired. She felt alive. Walking home, she kept replaying the music in her mind. Her fingers twitched lightly, as if wanting to play again. She smiled at the thought. Maybe she would practice tomorrow. Maybe she would even look into the offer from the music teacher. Maybe she could start small, just a few minutes of playing each evening. The important thing was that she wasn't afraid of the idea anymore. When she reached home, she sat by the window for a long time, watching the quiet street below. She imagined herself performing again one day, not in a big hall or in front of thousands, but simply in places where people listened with open hearts like they did tonight. She imagined sharing her music with others, not hiding it away. A soft feeling settled in her chest. It was hope. She knew life wouldn't magically become easy. She would still have bills to pay, early shifts, and responsibilities to handle. But she also had something precious now, the reminder that she still had a gift worth giving, and she promised herself that she wouldn't bury it again. That night, as she turned off the lights and got ready to sleep, she felt a quiet strength inside her. Her dream hadn't ended. It had simply been waiting for the right moment to return. And tonight, with a room full of strangers cheering for her, that moment had finally come.